What that means is that you have a lack of fluid. That's dehydration. Hydro is water. D is lack of or less. So dehydration is not enough water, essentially, but fluid. So what does that mean? Well, it's not just one thing. The body is a very complex machine with a lot of different moving parts, and they're all moving. And the amazing thing is that you could live in the Sahara Desert, or you could live on Antarctica, and you could do just as well.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Healthy Heart webinar. I'm Leslie Prinz, and with me we have Cheryl Ravey.
Hello.
Sometimes I still want to call you Cheryl Ingram.
Yep, maiden name. That was 10 years ago.
Every once in a while, I'll catch myself saying that. It's so funny.
It's so weird.
I've known you for a long time, I guess.
Yeah. What's your maiden name?
Johnson.
Johnson. Do you ever think Leslie Johnson?
So it is funny. If I write my name with in cursive a certain way, I automatically will write my maiden name. Because it's like the old way that I used to write it. I don't know. It's very funny how those things are just ingrained in your brain. Mm-hmm. Okay, Dr. Saunders is here. Let me add him here. I know we have 3 kind of Johnsons on our team, Esther.
Yeah, Esther is one of our team members, and she just wrote in the chat, I didn't know that Leslie, her last name is Johnson. And then we have someone who works with us whose first name is Johnson. Johnson, and Johnson, JJJ.
That's right.
Okay, Dr. Saunders, I think you should be good to go to change. Oh, wow, look at that picture back there. That's fun.
I love it. Triple J.
Wow, look at that. Your mom was a Johnson, Ryan. Oh my gosh, we have a bunch of the team on. This is so fun. We have the Ungers are on. Hello. Johnson, Triple J. Nice. Oh, this is funny. It's funny too, because I don't hear those last names as much as I used to, I feel like. So I don't know, just interesting.
Where in the world are you today, Dr. Saunders?
I'm in Solving. I know they changed the whole office. I just walked in and it was like this.
Nice surprise. It looks great.
Yeah, it was kind of nice.
Okay. I think we're live on Facebook. We'll see here. But if you're on Facebook, feel free to comment so that I know that it is working. Hello, all of you on YouTube. You are going to find a link probably below this video to bartonwebinar.com. There you will find information about these webinars. We do 2 of these each week. One is specifically for type 2 and one is for heart health. And we also record them. So we have probably 220, more than that, actually, 200 plus webinars that are recorded with Dr. Saunders, where he does some teaching. And then we also ask, you guys ask your questions. And so if you want to gain a lot of knowledge about health, I would totally recommend going there. Make sure you subscribe so that you're notified anytime that we upload one of these webinars. It's such good information. And we've had so many people that have had a lot of success, both in reversing their type 2 and gaining good heart health. And so we just really encourage you to do that. We're excited that you're here. We got some fun things to talk about today. Actually, today we're going to talk about dehydration, what that really means, what's happening in your body, what do we do about it? And we kind of want to hear from you. So I'm curious if you, first of all, how much water are you drinking in a day? And if you're not a water drinker, are you using like maybe IV? They have like the IV therapy, or what are they called? Mm-hmm. IV therapy, is that what those little packets are called? IV something. There's so many different kind of electrolyte type drinks. And I'm just curious if you guys are using those, and feel free to put that in the chat. But if you have questions as we go along, you can type those in the Q&A. We'd love to hear from you. That's kind of the easiest place for me to manage those questions. So again, comment in the chat. Dr. Saunders, we're so excited that you're here. Dr. Saunders is not your doctor, so quick disclaimer, anything that he says or recommends, you maybe check with your medical professional first before you implement those things. I'm saying that because I have to. And let's see.
And I'm not responsible for everyone.
Yeah.
Yes, that is true. And also everyone's different. So what's going on in your body may not be the same thing that's happening in the next person. So,
Wow.
all right, Saunders.
90 ounces a day.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we have a lot of people telling us how much they drink. 90 ounces, 88. That's pretty specific. 64.
Yes.
I don't track mine.
Oh my gosh, the Ungers noticed that I moved my pictures.
I
That is
know.
hilarious. That's awesome. You guys, you're the
Are
best.
those sheep? Are those sheep in the background? Is
Yeah,
that
what is
No.
the picture
It's
of?
flowers. The only, you know what, I can't remember where I ordered this, but it reminds me of our acreage that we lived on because we had kind of like this nice little creek type of thing that was in the back, and then just fields of flowers and all this stuff. And so it just reminds me of that. So I had to get it. All right. Yeah, we got, okay, you guys are good water drinkers. This is good. This is good. Okay, so with that though, let's talk about dehydration. Dr. Saunders, tell us what's happening in our body. First of all, when we get dehydrated, what do we do about it? And is water the solution?
Mhm.
Okay, you guys are going to be so surprised because yesterday I had a patient in my office, and so everything we would talk about something, and I'd say, well, no, that's not really the best. This is the best. She goes, what? My cardiologist said this, and that was like the cholesterol thing, and then the hypertension myth. Her blood pressure was too low, and I'm like, no, you should not be taking that medication. Your blood pressure is too low. What? That's my cardiologist said it lowers better, and I showed her the graph. You know, we've been through all this in our discussion so far. So now we're going to talk about another myth that all of you have heard. I know because I've heard it 100 times, and I've had so many patients come in, and the nurses, what I was working with in the nursing home, would have like a 1 gallon jug with a handle on it, and they would have like on the top it's like 8 a.m., 10 a.m., 12 noon, and then it would have that's how much she had to drink that gallon of water every day. And I'm like, oh my gosh, really? Okay, let's look at reality. Let's look at this, what dehydration is. So your question, Leslie, was what's dehydration? What that means is that you have a lack of fluid. A lack of fluid. That's dehydration. Hydro is water. D is lack of or less. So dehydration is not enough water, essentially, but fluid. So what does that mean? Well, it's not just one thing. The body is a very complex machine with a lot of different moving parts, and they're all moving. And the amazing thing is that you could live in the Sahara Desert, or you could live on Antarctica, and you could do just as well. You'd have to improvise. You'd have to have a way of getting enough water in the Sahara Desert, right, and food and all that. And then in Antarctica, you've got to have some way of keeping warm. But human beings are really the animals that are able to adjust to any environment, and no other animal does that. So if you have Arctic animals, they don't do well in a tropical environment. You have tropical animals, they do not do well in an Arctic environment. Certain birds, I know you're going to tell me about exceptions, but as far as the most adaptable, human beings. So one of the things that we adapt to very well is hydration. And you could have a little bit of water and get by. You can have a lot of water and get by. But dehydration is dependent on 3 separate main factors. Now, there's other things, of course, hormones and all that stuff, how your adrenals are functioning, kidney function, all that stuff. But as far as just the basic factors of what goes into your mouth, you have to have enough water, first of all, okay? Enough water. And then you have to have enough sodium. If you don't have enough sodium, then you get dehydrated. And you have to have enough potassium. So this is really interesting how this system works. If you don't have enough water, then your system will get rid of sodium and potassium, for that matter, to maintain a balance, because your electrolytes have to be balanced in the right amount. You can't have too much, too thick. Your blood can't be too thick, nor can it be too thin. So it has to be balanced, and that's what the kidney does. The kidneys are doing this constantly, maintaining this certain amount of salt in your water, in your blood, to maintain that. So what happens if you don't drink enough water? Well, your blood volume drops down, and then your blood vessels have to constrict somewhat. And so then if they do that, then they're narrower, and they have to have a faster blood flow to get the perfusion to your whole body. So when people tell you dehydration is not good for you, they're going, yeah, it is. Our purpose for being here is to discuss the cardiovascular, or the vascular system, or blood vessels, right? And so what happens when you don't have enough fluid, you get damage to the arteries. You get more damage because, remember, you have that very thin lining inside that protects your arteries called the glycocalyx. And if you have faster blood flow and it wears away that glycocalyx, and you expose the artery wall, you get a clot that forms. And that's where people get atherosclerosis, is the clots forming on the sides. And so dehydration can contribute to that. It's not a cause necessarily, it's a contribution. If you have to have other things, inflammation and other things going on. But you don't want to be dehydrated and add to that problem, right? Because you want to get good perfusion, good flow to everywhere. So get enough water. Well, how much is enough water? Well, guess what? It's not that hard. All you need to do is drink when you're thirsty. You actually have a thirst mechanism to say, not enough water here. And so what does that mean? Well, if you're sweating a lot, you're going to be losing a lot of water, and you're going to have to drink more. If you're really cold, your blood vessels are all constricted, you'll probably pee out more water to get rid of all the extra water that you have instead of sweating it out. So kidneys are maintaining your water level all the time. And as temperature changes, as things in your environment change, then the water is being balanced. So when you're thirsty, drink water. When you're not thirsty, you don't have to drink water. You can, but you don't have to, right? So, and we'll talk about that in a minute, because we'll go to the next one: salt, sodium salt. Sodium salt, it turns out, is really important for maintaining your blood volume. If you don't have enough sodium, then your blood volume drops down and you constrict the blood vessels. And guess what? Low sodium diets contribute to heart disease. That's the big myth. And so when you're told, oh, sodium's bad for you, and exactly how is it bad for you? Well, the idea was, if you eat less sodium, then you'll have a lower blood volume and your blood pressure will go down. So it's an idea that somebody had that would lower blood pressure. And guess what? You can actually do that. And sometimes we do that on purpose. We give people pills like diuretics to make them pee out extra water. Their kidneys are going to maintain this amount, but we give them a diuretic so that the kidneys are maintaining a lower level of water, so that the blood pressure drops down. And so that was a thought that was, oh, that makes sense. Let's drop the blood pressure, and by just lowering our salt so that we have lower blood volume. It turns out that's not really healthy. Remember, it causes a vasoconstriction, which causes more damage to the lining of the arteries, which increases heart disease and vascular disease. So it's not better to be on a low sodium diet. And low sodium diets, when studied, do show a higher rate of vascular disease. So what about the other one? What's that potassium thing over there? Oh, potassium. So now think about your water in the two different compartments. You have the blood compartment, where that's the circulating water. And then you have the static water, the cells. The cells are just sitting there and they're full of water, right? That's what's maintaining the inside of the cell. So you got this water inside the cell that's just sitting there. It's not really, it's a constant flux, but it's not like flowing like blood. So we'll just say it's sitting there like pooled. So what keeps your water in the cells? Potassium. That's what does it. If you drop your potassium levels, then your cellular volume drops and your cells crenate. They shrink down. They get wrinkled and kind of ugly. And what happens then is the cell can work, but not as well. It needs a good volume to work, and it needs potassium to work, because potassium not only keeps the volume of the cell proper, because the potassium balances the sodium on the outside. The sodium's in the blood, potassium's in the cell, and that keeps a balance, cause an osmotic balance. So there's no osmotic pressure, so the cells aren't getting too big or too small. But if the potassium drops, then in order to maintain that balance, the water's got to be lost, right? So your cells get all shrunken. That's called intracellular dehydration. So if you've ever talked to somebody who says, I am thirsty all the time, I'm always thirsty, I drink water like crazy, I'm drinking 2 gallons of water a day, and I'm just always thirsty, I just can't get enough water. Well, do you think it's a blood volume problem? Possibly, that's one thing, but I'll bet you the large majority of them, and I test a lot of people, and yes, by far, the large majority of them have a intracellular potassium deficiency. And so they don't have enough salt and they're dehydrated. All of their cells are dehydrated. It's not volume dehydration from the blood, it's cellular dehydration. These cells are all shrunken down. So then your brain is saying, hey, we don't have enough water here. We need some volume. So you're thirsty. You got to drink and drink and drink. But the problem isn't getting the water. The problem is maintaining it, because there's not enough potassium there, and your osmotic pressure has to stay the same. So if any water goes in, it's got to be taken out. And if there's too much water in the blood, then the kidneys will just pee it out. So people go, I drink, I pee, I drink, I pee, I drink, I pee. And those kind of people, they're dehydrated from either sodium or potassium, and often it's potassium. That's a common one, actually. So if you're drinking water and you are just peeing it out and you're still thirsty, then you've got a different kind of a problem. It's not a water problem. Remember, water is just one issue. You've got either a sodium, you're not getting enough salt, or potassium. Now, we've talked about this before. Why is that important? Well, potassium, it turns out, is what all of the energy of your body comes from. So if you don't have that osmotic gradient, if you don't have a good intracellular potassium level, normally it's like 3,000. If it drops to 2,000, which I've seen, then you have 1/3 the amount of energy of somebody who has their level at 3,000, because there's practically none. There's like 4 outside, 5 outside in the blood. So that is what allows all the machinery of the cell to work. That's what allows your nervous system to conduct an impulse from your toe all the way up to your brain and all the way back down. That's the potassium does that. And if you don't have enough potassium, everything runs slower. So if you've ever felt like you're running on your batteries are dying, you're running on 50 volts, you should be on 100 volts, you're running on 50 volts. Just pooping out easily, fatigue. I have found that that's often potassium. In fact, if you've ever heard of chronic fatigue syndrome, that is the Epstein-Barr virus poisons the sodium-potassium pump that pumps out the sodium and in the potassium, and it poisons the pump so that you can't get potassium into the cells. That's why the fatigue, because you're literally running on low voltage. Because of that virus, what the virus does. So dehydration, this is important. Get enough potassium. How do you get enough potassium? Well, people say take a supplement, but those pills, potassium pills, are like 99 milligrams. It's 99. You need 4,000. So you're not going to take 40 of those pills a day. And if you did, it would eat away the lining of your intestines, because your intestines are made of fats, and potassium makes fat into soap. so then you would end up with a bunch of soap, and you'd have just a nasty problem with your bowels. So don't take a bunch of potassium pills. Get 4,000 milligrams of potassium or more by eating it in foods. So we talked about this before. An avocado has like 800, a baked potato has like 800, a banana has about 400. You can imagine though, think about it, 400, that means I have to eat 10 bananas a day, right? Or, making sure you get enough fruit and vegetables, because meat doesn't have a significant amount of potassium. It does have some, but eating fruits and vegetables in large amounts will give you a good source of potassium.
Wow, this is interesting.
I was going to say, of course, you wrote a couple articles about dehydration for home cures. Not that I'm plugging it or anything, but we do list a bunch of sodium-rich foods. Avocado's high on the list, but what's surprising is pinto beans and lentils, celery juice, and sweet potatoes are not quite double the amount of bananas, but maybe 1.5 times the amount of bananas. For some of these are for potassium. So go for a sweet potato or lentils for your potassium.
Yeah, beans are a great source of potassium, by the way. They're really good. Yeah.
Awesome. Lilia, I think it's Lilia, if I'm looking correctly, says that I know when my potassium is low because I get really bad leg cramps.
Yeah, and that's another thing. The magnesium and potassium are needed to relax muscles, and calcium causes contraction. So if your calcium and magnesium are off, or your sodium potassium off, you can get cramps in your muscles, and that can be really painful.
I've sometimes heard if you wait to drink until you're thirsty, then you've waited too long.
Yeah, they say that, but
are there other symptoms of dehydration, like brain fog or just fatigue or anything else?
I don't know. I just go by thirst, and I've read several studies on it, and going by thirst is a good way to go, because either way, if you're thirsty, you should be able to drink water and get your volume up. If you can't, then you need some salt in your water. I actually have people who put salt in their water because of that. And then potassium is it's actually a fairly common deficiency. It's hard to maintain that. So getting enough fruit and vegetables to improve that. So yeah, going by thirst, I think, is still the best.
Okay. We're starting to get a bunch of questions here. I'm going to just start digging into these. Not all of them will be related to dehydration. Someone did mention coffee and tea, though. I feel like I've heard such conflicting information on this, but how do you feel about coffee and tea? Are they dehydrating, or can we count it in our water count, or, what do you think?
Okay, I've looked at it. I actually read the studies on it, and it's pretty much a wash. So yes, the caffeine does act as a diuretic and makes you pee out extra water, but it's really only about the amount you're drinking. So it's kind of like coffee doesn't add, nor does it subtract.
So I think what I heard you say is it's worth it.
Yeah, I was just like, coffee drinkers unite.
All right. Now that we know, okay. Let's see. We have a question here. Allison says, my husband just had a valve replacement a week ago and one bypass. The doctor put him on a statin and a beta blocker 2 weeks before surgery and said he would be on it the rest of his life. His cholesterol was 202. What are your thoughts? I hate him being on the meds for life. Do you think he could get off them after he is all healed from the surgery? Thank you for your thoughts.
Okay. I'm not going to advise you specifically. I'm going to just speak about this as a general concept of what is it that would require a statin drug. So statin drugs have benefits to people who have familial hypercholesterolemia, where their cholesterol is between 300 and 400, and it doesn't come down with anything they eat or anything like that. So in 30 years of practicing medicine, general family practice, including working in the county and my private practice, I have found 2 people who needed statins. And I told them, you just need a statin. And they go, well, one of them just took it, and the other one said, well, I don't want to take a statin. I'm like, I'm sorry, you have an issue. And this is the best way to handle your genetic issue. You got to work around your genes. And so the optimum level of cholesterol, we've talked about this, is somewhere between 230 and 250 is the lowest death rate from cholesterol. So a cholesterol level of 202 is actually an increasing by dropping the cholesterol down, you raise your death rate. So think about that as you're taking the statin. Look for an optimum range of where you want the cholesterol to be, and it should be 235, 230. That's usually the ideal. And then the other one was a statin, and what was the other? Oh, it was a beta blocker.
Beta
right?
blocker. Yep.
Yeah. The beta blocker, because of the valve replacement, you may have to be on a beta blocker to slow down and to prevent excessive contractions of the heart. Maybe for a little while. I don't know. You work with your cardiologist on that and look at an echocardiogram can show you how the function of that is working. And there may be some extenuating circumstances that may require a beta blocker because that diminishes the contractions of the heart and slows it down so it doesn't get too fast. So you may need that with a valve. I don't know.
Okay. Let's see. Anonymous says, do you know anyone who could measure localized or systemic succinate or fumarase levels? The question is related to Reed syndrome and HLRCC and whether it could be affecting cardiac performance.
Yeah. Succinate and fumarate, succinic acid and fumaric acid. I think a local lab should be able to measure them, or you could get an organic acids test, an OAT. And a lot of local labs, I know Quest does OAT, and I think they have both succinic and fumaric acid in them. Let's see, what else? Genova Diagnostics is a lab in North Carolina, and I get kits from them. I just, you send to them, they send you a kit, and they'll do an OAT called a NutriVal. And I think they do have succinic acid and fumaric acid. But your local lab should be able to draw blood or collect urine. Often it's a urine test, that 24-hour urine collection to look at that.
And we were on a webinar yesterday where someone had mentioned a website where they could do some tests that not all doctors do all the time. Do you remember what that was yesterday, Dr. Saunders?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was anywhere, anytime testing or something like that. Test anywhere, test anytime, something.
Yeah, maybe
like
Google something about that. Like I was going to say any test now, but I think it ends in the word test.
Yeah.
It does say testanywhere.org, but that looks like it's same day COVID and lab test results.
Oh, here it is. Yeah. Actually says requestatest.com.
Requestatest.com.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah. So maybe check that out. I'm not familiar with it. Someone had just mentioned that site yesterday. So possibly. All right. Let's see, another question here from Ashley. How do you determine if a 5% gallbladder ejection factor is causing cardiac issues, like AFib, instead of being independent?
5% gallbladder ejection fraction, or 5% heart ejection fraction?
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't know either.
Sometimes I read things and I hope you know what it means, because I definitely don't.
Okay, so the ejection fraction, like of a heart, when you're doing the heart test, is you have the amount. So you have the blood fills the heart, and then the heart contracts and pushes a certain amount out of it. If it's all of it, it's 100%. If it's half of it, then 50%. And between 50 and 70 is kind of normal. 5% would be like your heart's just barely beating at all, barely getting any blood out with each pump. So I doubt I don't think that's compatible with life. I don't know.
Okay. Let's see. Aubrey says, what if your potassium is too high? And how do you know if your potassium level is good? Good question.
Oh, great question. Okay. So when you get a blood test and your potassium level is high, that means something. That means your kidneys are not getting rid of potassium. They're not balancing those electrolytes in your blood very well. And that means there's some issue. Sometimes it's because people are taking a diuretic. Sometimes it's because they have an excess of certain hormones like aldosterone, or they have an insulin issue. So with diabetes, you can get that too. So yeah, interesting question. So if it's because what they're doing with the potassium is they're looking at blood levels, and there should be very little in the blood. It's like 5 or 3, 4, 5, somewhere in there. And so if it's like 6, then yeah, there's something wrong with your kidneys. There's some problem there.
Ashley had mentioned that there's just been some research on the connection between the heart and the gallbladder that she's found. So,
yeah, okay.
Interesting. Okay, there was another really good question here. There's so many good questions. This is great. Hey, this came up in another call. Is it okay to put baking soda in your water?
Oh, okay. That's a great question. So that's a kidney issue. And there have been studies, and there was a pretty good, well-run study comparing a group of people that all had early stage, like stage 3 kidney disease. They had diabetes, various problems. And so half of them were given baking soda, which is just like a half a teaspoon a day in water. And the other half didn't have the baking soda, and they otherwise lived their life. The ones that had the baking soda were much less likely to progress to renal failure and dialysis than the ones that didn't have the baking soda. So as far as improving the, I think alkalinity is what we say, improving the function of the enzymes by being a little more alkaline. It seems like baking soda is a good idea. So, and how much? I don't know. Yeah. In our society, some is good, so more is better, right? But the study was just done with a half a teaspoon a day. So, yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Doesn't taste good. I hate the taste of baking soda.
Like they just don't mix. They just don't mix. Okay. Interesting question. Anonymous says, any reason why I'd be extra thirsty on rainy days?
Huh. Yeah, that doesn't make sense. It's really humid, so you're probably not going to be sweating a lot. It's probably cooler, so you're not going to be sweating unless you live in the tropics where it's rainy and you get 100% humidity and you sweat like crazy on rainy days. Then you'll be more thirsty. Otherwise, so you get excess thirst from several different causes. So like when you're sweating, you're losing sodium and potassium and water. So you're actually getting dehydrated from sweating pretty a lot. And so on rainy days, if you're warm, you may be sweating more. I don't know, that's a possibility. Another way of getting dehydration is dilation of blood vessels. So if your blood vessels dilate, then you need more blood volume. And so you go, oh, not enough blood volume, I'm thirsty. And you need to drink more water and get more sodium. So you have more blood volume. So dilation of blood vessels can happen from heat. So if you're sitting in a hot tub, for example, and you get really thirsty, some people like when they sleep. So when you go to sleep, your your body temperature drops by about 2 degrees, and then it warms up, and it can warm up by 3 degrees, for example. And so that causes dilation of blood vessels. And so some people get really hot at night, and then the blood vessels dilate, and they're really thirsty. So they wake up super thirsty. But I don't know about the rainy day thing. I just don't know.
Unless they're hearing the water and it makes them have to go to the bathroom. And they're needing to drink more.
That's the thing.
You never know.
What would a Epsom salt bath do? Would that help someone who's dehydrated? If this is
I don't know.
sodium issue and magnesium.
Yeah, I know you can absorb magnesium through the skin. I don't know. Sodium and potassium, somewhat you do also, because sweat, you can actually reabsorb some of the sweat. I know about that. Um, so that's something, that's a very good question. I have not, I like swimming in the ocean, for example,
Yeah.
right? There's magnesium in the ocean water and sodium. Huh, I don't know.
Okay, two things. I had someone ask where they can access these webinars after they've been presented. Guys, all of these are posted to our YouTube channel. So I'm going to go ahead and post a link to that. But also someone is really interested in reading more articles that Dr. Saunders has written. So I'm going to let Cheryl chat about home cures that work.
Yeah, so I did answer Doreen. So you can visit homecuresthatwork.com. It's a compilation of Dr. Saunders articles for over 15 years, a monthly article from Dr. Saunders plus other health writers, and some are subscription required. So we do have a 50% off coupon code you can use, Home Cures 50, but every month there are new articles from Dr. Saunders, and it's a wealth of information. It's like a go-to. When my husband asks me a question, sometimes when we come for a topic here, I'm like, Dr. Saunders has written on that before, or there are other people who've written on that. So if you're interested in just learning about any health topic, go to homecuresthatwork.com.
I'm writing one right now on omega-3 oils that, man, I started researching it like 2 weeks ago, and I have spent hours and hours and hours. There is so much on this that I didn't know, and that I imagine, how do people know this stuff? How do people know what an essential fatty acid is, and what's a PUFA, and what's a HUFA, and what's a saturated fat, and an unsaturated fat, and a polyunsaturated fat, all of this stuff. How do you know? Gosh, I went through medical school and I didn't know any of this stuff. So, but I just do a Q&A. So it's just like, what's the difference between an oil, a lipid, and a fat? And I answer that. And then what is essential fatty acid? And then what is PUFA? And then what is saturated fat? And I have illustrations of each one. And then at the end, because it's home cures that work, right? What are we curing? What do you do about that? How much omega-3 should I take, or should I take any at all? Or, oh my gosh, this is crazy. People are getting these omega-369 essential fatty acid, right, supplements. Bad news, don't take them. And I explain why in the article. It's a long explanation, but yeah, I research them, and as I'm learning, I just share what I learned. That's what the article is.
And Dr. Saunders always includes all of his references. So it's not like he's just giving his personal knowledge. It's all this research that he's done. And we've said before, he wakes up early. He does all this research. This article won't be available until September. So once it is, we'll give you a link to it. But yeah, it'll be good.
It's going to be good.
It's going to be good. Okay, question here from Connie. My sister recently had reconstructive foot surgery and developed some complications. One of the complications is congestive heart failure, which she never had before. They are giving her a drug drip right now, and of course are measuring output. They have put her on a very restrictive diet, no salt, only so many ounces of fluid per day as intake, and giving her potassium. My question is, can congestive heart failure be cured? And if not, why?
Okay. The answer to the first question is it depends. It depends on the cause, because congestive heart failure, all it means is that the heart is not pumping right. That's all. It's just not pumping right. So I have a pool, and I have a pump to my pool, and my wife says the pump's not working, and we need to call the electrician and fix the pump. I go, well, why isn't the pump working? Well, it turns out I went and looked at it, and there's this pre-filter thing that was all blocked up, like completely blocked up. I go, okay, that's the problem right there. The filter was blocked up. And so we cleaned out the filter, and it pumped just fine. We didn't need an electrician. So that's what the way to look at your heart is the same thing. The pump's not working. Okay, next question, why is it not working? Because if you don't know why it's not working, then you don't just call a cardiologist and say, or a heart surgeon and say, okay, fix the heart. well, fix what? What's broken? What's the problem? Is it okay, the surgery, what happened in the surgery? Did she get toxic? Did she get cardiotoxicity? Did she get cardiomyopathy? Was there a clot that formed and got into the heart? Is there a lack of blood flow to the heart? Why? You got to know why, because if you don't know why, then you don't know what to fix. So the question, can it be fixed? Well, yeah, if you know why it is and it's something fixable, then generally it is. Heart failure can be for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes the heart just isn't getting enough energy, so it doesn't dilate very well. So the heart can't fill up. So it's called diastolic dysfunction, where it pumps, but it just doesn't fill up very much. It pumps, but it has a long time to relax. So it doesn't let blood come in very well. That's one way. The other way is, like we were saying, the 5% ejection fraction. That's just like, it pumps just fine, but only 5%. So it's not getting any blood flow through there because it's not getting enough oomph to get all that blood out and push it through the body. So find out why. That's heart failure. That's really important.
Alexander says, my mother was told to reduce her potassium intake. Meanwhile, she has also suffered with edema and is taking water pills. Something seems out of balance.
Yeah, there's definitely something out of balance. If someone is told to reduce potassium because they have high potassium, you got to be really careful with that, because you also have to know why. Why are not the kidneys functioning? What is wrong? Is there a hormone imbalance? Is it aldosterone? You got to look at the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands maintain that the pressure and will change your sodium potassium balance, and that's really important. So it could be the pituitary gland. It could be the kidneys themselves. So decreasing potassium. Yeah, if you have kidney failure, you have to eat a low potassium diet because you have kidney failure and your kidneys can't regulate your potassium. And you're going to tend to hang on to potassium, not going to be able to get rid of it very easily. So, but that's from renal failure. So if she has renal failure, that's a totally different issue. She may have to be on a low potassium diet. But otherwise, you got to ask the question why.
Well, and Chris had mentioned here too, when that edema occurs, is it necessary to eat high protein?
No. It's, very rarely is it a protein problem, because the protein in the protein that's made in the liver called albumin is what gets allows, it stays in the blood vessels. The fluid leaks out, but the proteins stay in, and the proteins kind of suck in the water to prevent the edema from happening. So it's an osmotic pressure created by the protein. So that's what he's talking about, what Chris is talking about. Okay. And so if somebody has really low protein, like if they're losing protein from kidney failure and the proteins are just leaking through the filter like a sieve, and then in that case, you gotta probably add extra protein, but you gotta fix the problem even then.
Anonymous says, my mom takes a cholesterol med and it lowered down to 119, and now she is stiff everywhere and struggles to move.
Okay, let's talk about the side effects of statin drugs. Number one side effect is it lowers cholesterol. Is that a problem? Yeah. Guess what? Every cell in your body has to have cholesterol. Your brain can't function without cholesterol. In fact, there is no cell in your body that does not need cholesterol. So how do you get enough cholesterol? Well, that's not a problem because you can make it. And your cells will make it unless you're taking a statin. And that's where the problem comes in, because now your cells are not able to make cholesterol, and that's a problem. What else? Well, all of your hormones are made out of cholesterol and something called CoQ10, coenzyme Q10. CoQ10 is a very important part of the function of the mitochondrial membranes, where the energy is made for muscles. Muscle stiffness happens because the muscles can't relax. So we think of muscles as you contract you're putting energy into it to contract, but it's more like a mouse trap where you have to put the energy into it and then set it. And all you need is a little teeny tap and bam, a mouse trap goes off, right? That's the way a muscle works. The contraction is it goes off. You have to reset it with energy. And that's why the muscles don't relax. That's why they're stiff and hard and they spasm and they're contracted. And people who get paralysis, depends on the type of paralysis, will often they'll get all shriveled up because they don't have any energy. And the muscles without energy are just going to contract and shrivel up. And that's what happens. So it sounds like that would be a side effect of of being on a statin drug.
Okay. William said, I had triple bypass March 11th, 2022, and I'm doing well, but I was told to take atorvastatin, whatever, 80 milligrams since the surgery, but I haven't been taking it. I had side effects when I did. My doctor said my LDL is around 179 and insists I should take it. What is your take on this?
Okay, I'd really like to know what your other numbers are, because LDL, remember we talked about this. LDL is not related to heart disease. In fact, when they actually look at, statistically speaking, general overall, the AI program for the United Kingdom AI study for heart disease found LDL cholesterol was number 46 out of 48. It was like way down the list, like not even related to heart disease. So what your LDL level is irrelevant, just completely irrelevant. Don't even think about it. Don't even test it again. Don't even do that test. It's a useless test. So, what is relevant though? Okay, you need to know this. Like, what is your lipoprotein A level? We went through all these tests. What is your triglyceride level? That is actually related to heart disease. What is your clotting factors, or not clotting factors, but your fibrinogen, for example, a D-dimer? Do you have any inflammatory markers? These are much more important. Find out why you had to have the bypass in the first place, and then stop that. And one of the things we're going to talk about soon is essential fatty acids. And gosh, I'm going to give you guys a preview. This is like, I wonder if I could just show from my, I can probably just show this. Let me see. This is a graph, and it's been around a long time, and I've seen it before. But this is a graph. Does that show up? Yeah, that shows up. Okay. So along the bottom here is the amount of omega-6 oils in the blood. So the percentage of omega-6 oils in the blood. So this is 30% omega-6. Then that means the other 70% is omega-3, right? Because that's the EFAs, essential fatty acids. Over here is 80% omega-6, which means it's 20% omega-3, right? And look at what happens to the death rate. Now, these are multiple studies done at different times everywhere in the world. We have one from Japan. We have one from Greenland. We have the United States. Look at how high the death rate is. So look at the death rate is less than 20 for Greenland, death rate, compared to 200 from the United States. And look at the nice linear relationship between the omega-6 oils. The higher the omega-6 oils, the higher the death rate. Okay. So why do you have heart disease? Well, you know what? Maybe all those vegetable oils and corn oil and soy oil and all those oils with omega-6 PUFAs, polyunsaturated fatty acids, are related to that. So we talked. Did we talk about omega-3 last time? We did a little bit. Yeah, but
we did dive into it at one point, but
yeah.
this would be good to really talk more about.
Yeah. So looking. Yeah. That's when the article comes out next month. Right. We'll talk about it next month.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay. Deal.
So good. Okay. Another question here. Patricia said my HDL and LDL's cholesterol were in absolute normal levels until I went on a very low carb diet, and both my HDL and LDL levels went astronomically high. I do eat lots of nuts and eggs. Dr. Saunders, please, is there a correlation between a low carb diet and cholesterol levels?
Well, it's not necessarily a low carb diet. It's the fats that you're eating. So certain fats, especially trans fats and omega-6 fats, do change your levels of HDL and LDL, but they change your cholesterol because it changes how your cholesterol is made. They do not specifically, they're not made into that. That's not what happens. It's just that your liver makes the cholesterol in a different way. It binds up the lipoproteins is what they're called. So yes, it does in a low carb diet. So the way you get around that is increase the fiber in your diet. And by the fiber, like if in the diabetes solution kit, we talk about free foods, and they're high fiber foods that don't have a lot of carbohydrates in them. So you can have a low carb diet, a very low carb diet, and still have all the spinach you want, and broccoli and lettuce and salads and cauliflower and bok choy, and just, add in especially cruciferous vegetables. Man, I'm going to do a Home Cures at Work article on cruciferous vegetables, because all by themselves, if you want a superfood like cruciferous vegetables, they're superfoods. Why? They significantly lower cancer risk. So we talk about like, oh, you got to do your mammogram. That's really important. You know what you get from that? A 3% less risk. Whereas the cruciferous vegetables, if you eat them daily, it's like 50%. It is so much different. So the way to handle the issue with the changes in HDL and LDL is to have a very high fiber diet on your low carbohydrate diet.
Awesome. All right. And when we talk a lot in the Healthy Heart Solution Kit about fiber, and there are some really, really good recipes in there. So for those of you who aren't doing low carb, there's really, really good recipes in here. And actually some of these probably are low carb as well, just by chance. They're just loaded with fiber and they're really good. So be sure to check that out. I think we got through most all of our questions today. Yes, we did. Okay, Dr. Saunders, you go be with your patients. We're so thankful that you were here to be with us. We'll keep chatting with these guys about some things.
Okay.
And we'll see you next week.
All right. Bye.